You know, when you pack for a major trip and you lay out absolutely everything you think you might possibly need?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like the 3 pairs of shoes and the contingency jacket for that freak weather event that probably won't even happen.
Exactly. And the like 6 books you swear you're finally going to read on the beach.
Right, which you never actually read.
Never. But then, a few hours later, you find yourself dragging this massive, incredibly heavy suitcase through this endless airport terminal.
Yeah, just sweating and miserable.
Completely miserable, and you're just regretting every single item you packed.
It is such a universal experience. And inevitably, as you're wrestling with this giant bag, you look up and see someone just breeze past you with this tiny, battered little backpack.
Oh, I'm always so jealous of that person.
Right. They look completely unbothered by the world. And part of you just wonders, what it would actually feel like to travel that light.
Yeah, that exact feeling, that being weighed down by your own preparations. Well, today, for you, our fellow learner out there who loves gathering knowledge and figuring out how the world works, we are unpacking something wild.
We really are.
We've got a text that basically tells us to take that entire heavy suitcase of modern life and just, throw it straight into the ocean.
Literally just heave it overboard. So welcome to today's deep dive. Today we're looking at a really fascinating 2012 philosophical essay.
Yeah, it's by a thinker named Xuefeng, and it's titled, Be Simpler, Much Simpler. We're working off a translation edited by Kinyu.
That's the one. And I mean, the core premise here is right there in the title, but Xuefeng takes this concept of simplicity to an absolute extreme.
He really does.
He argues that a complex mind leads directly to a complex, dissatisfied life. In his worldview, excessive pursuit, greed, the desire for possession, they don't bring us security.
Right, they just bring anxiety.
Exactly. They only result in a rocky destiny.
Yeah.
He frames life as nothing more than this temporary journey of the soul through the human world. And eventually, we all have to disembark.
Okay, but I have to point out the glaring irony here right off the bat.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
I mean, you tuned into this deep dive today to learn, right? You want to gain a new perspective, add a new tool to your intellectual toolkit.
Yep.
But the very first lesson of this text is to stop doing exactly that. Xuefeng literally wants us to drop the heavy luggage of ambition and even our intellectual striving.
Yeah, it is a radical, almost absolute rejection of what we would call modern hustle culture today.
Completely.
And just to set the tone for our discussion today, we are acting strictly as your impartial guides through this philosophy.
Right. We aren't endorsing it. We aren't judging it.
Exactly. We are simply unpacking this fascinating and honestly sometimes shocking worldview because it directly challenges the foundational assumptions of how most of us operate in society.
Okay, so let's start taking things out of that suitcase then. If life is a temporary journey where we need to travel as light as humanly possible, what goes first?
Well, the first things to go overboard aren't physical items like your contingency jacket. They are your internal drives.
So ambition goes.
Ambition goes, fame goes.
Okay, but the real friction point for me is his stance on intellectual curiosity. The text explicitly says, and I quote, "Do not harbor ambitions and aspirations."
Yeah. He says we should discard even the idea of having a name, seeking only inner peace and a clear conscience.
Which is wild, and he doesn't just go after corporate greed, right? He goes after the craving for knowledge itself.
He explicitly instructs readers not to crave knowledge or learning. He actually points to earthworms and little birds as the ideal models for living.
Wait, okay, I'm going to push back on this on behalf of anyone listening right now. Earthworms.
Literally earthworms.
Because, learning is how we solve problems. It's how we cure diseases and build bridges. There's an obvious evolutionary advantage to gathering information. Are we seriously supposed to aspire to the intellectual life of a bug in the dirt?
I know it sounds completely counterintuitive to a society built on progress. But if we look at the psychology of his philosophy, the pursuit of knowledge is equated with a form of greed.
Greed, like hoarding facts instead of money.
Exactly. The underlying mechanism here is that intellectual complexity creates anxiety. He actually claims, and this is a direct quote, that people who call themselves experts in both Eastern and Western knowledge are fools who do not comprehend the true meaning of life.
Oh, wow. That is a brutal assessment of anyone with a university degree.
It is entirely uncompromising. But his logic is that the mind becomes constantly burdened by the need to categorize everything.
Right, you're always trying to anticipate the future or control outcomes.
Exactly. When you label yourself an expert, you carry the heavy weight of that identity everywhere you go.
So the goal isn't just to be ignorant for the sake of being uneducated.
No, not at all. The goal is reaching a state where your mind isn't burdened by anything outside of the immediate present moment.
Okay, I see. So that's where the earthworms come in.
Right. Earthworms and little birds are ideals because they exist perfectly in their environment without the burden of anticipation.
They don't study the dirt, they just, move through it.
Beautifully put, yeah. Xuefeng argues our true aim should simply be joy at every moment, and constantly acquiring data gets in the way of that joy.
Okay, I can somewhat wrap my head around dropping my ego or my need to be the smartest person in the room.
Sure.
But my mortgage is a physical reality. My need for a savings account is a practical reality. Does his philosophy extend to the actual physical stuff we use to survive?
Oh, it extends to every single corner of material existence. Because he views intellectual accumulation as a burden, it naturally follows that physical and social accumulation are traps as well.
So what are the rules there?
They're incredibly strict. The text lays it out clearly. Do not buy houses. Do not buy cars. Do not stash money in banks.
Okay, wait. That immediately begs the question of where these people are supposed to live. Does he give a framework for how this actually functions in the real world?
He does, actually. He points to a specific model referring to residents of Lifechanyuan's second home.
What exactly is Lifechanyuan's second home? Is that like a literal place he built or more of a metaphor?
Well, in the context of this essay, it serves as the ultimate structural ideal for the philosophy. It's presented as a communal environment where residents possess nothing but lack for nothing.
Possess nothing but lack for nothing. Okay, so collective simplicity.
Exactly. You're instructed to just have enough to meet your immediate needs, or ideally own absolutely nothing personally.
Wow. It's like the ultimate extreme social detox.
It really is.
You aren't just unsubscribing from annoying emails, you are unsubscribing from the entire social contract of, keeping up with the Joneses.
Oh, and those rules apply to how you interact with people, too. The essay says do not cultivate relationships.
Wait, really? No relationships?
Right. Do not flatter or fawn over those with power. Do not envy the rich. And absolutely do not chase after or imitate celebrities.
I mean, I can get behind the no celebrity worship part, but the psychology here seems to be about reclaiming autonomy, right?
That's exactly it. This isn't just financial advice about living within your means to save a few bucks. By refusing to play the social game, the networking, the flattery, you actively detach from external validation.
Because human suffering largely stems from constantly measuring where we stand in the social hierarchy.
Spot on. If you step off the ladder entirely, you can't fall off.
You completely eliminate the anxiety of social gravity.
There's a great way to put it. Instead of playing the hierarchy game, Xuefeng says to live naturally, walk your own path, speak your own words.
Be your own person.
Exactly. You are supposed to entrust your life to what he calls the greatest creator, and just let the Tao manage your life.
Okay, but if I empty my bank account and I step away from my career ladder and I stop spending my evenings reading books, I am going to have an incredible amount of free time.
You definitely are.
So my immediate assumption reading this was that he would want me to spend all those newly freed hours in intense spiritual meditation, like doing yoga, pursuing enlightenment, trying to become a guru.
You would think that, wouldn't you? That seems like the natural progression for someone advocating for extreme simplicity.
Right. But he doesn't?
Nope. He actually views spiritual striving as just another trap.
Wow.
Yeah, the text specifically says, do not constantly expect to reach heaven or become a celestial or a Buddha.
So attachment to enlightenment is just another piece of heavy luggage.
Exactly. The desire to become perfectly calm is still a desire, which ruins the calm.
That makes sense, actually. It reminds me of muscle memory in sports.
Oh, how so?
Like, if a professional golfer is standing over a putt, the worst thing they can do is actively think about the mechanics of their swing.
Oh yeah, they'll overthink it.
Right. The moment they try to control the action, they mess it up. True mastery is just letting the body do what it naturally knows how to do without the brain interfering.
That is a fantastic way to understand the Taoist concept of non-action that Xuefeng is channeling here. He states that the highest realms are actually defined by absence.
Absence of action.
Right. He writes that true cultivation requires no cultivation. The highest realm of Buddhism is non-practice.
Huh.
The highest form of martial arts is non-technique. Even the most refined management is non-management.
Well, that entirely rules out traveling to, like, ashrams in the mountains to find spiritual guides.
Oh, he explicitly forbids it. He discourages people from traveling far and wide to find high-level masters to discuss cultivation.
Let me guess, it's too much effort.
He argues it's costly, laborious, and ultimately a delusion, especially if you harbor ideas of acquiring supernatural powers or, special spiritual status.
But the philosophy goes way further than just telling you to relax your spiritual ambitions.
Oh, it gets much more extreme.
Yeah, there is a rule in this essay about radical, absolute non-judgment. You aren't supposed to pass judgment on anyone. The text literally says you shouldn't even judge demons.
Because everything in the world has a proper arrangement.
Right. And to explain this, Xuefeng uses a highly memorable, very visceral anatomical metaphor.
Yes, the anatomy analogy is definitely one of the most striking parts of the entire essay.
I am just going to quote it directly so everyone can hear the exact phrasing. It says, "The mouth should not despise the anus for being too dirty, and the anus should not be envious of the mouth's nobility."
It is quite the image.
It goes on to say that criticizing others or speaking ill of them just reveals your own inner ugliness. Now, when I first read that, I laughed.
I mean, it's hard not to.
But then I hit a wall. How do we navigate a moral world or have a functioning society if we aren't even allowed to judge a demon or, the metaphorical anus of society?
Right, because there are bad actors in the world.
Exactly.
It is a wild analogy, but it grounds a very profound philosophical concept, which is radical acceptance.
Radical acceptance.
The underlying mechanism requires you to operate from the premise that the universe, or the Tao, has a perfect intentional design.
Okay.
If you believe the system is closed and perfectly balanced, then judging any single part of it is the ultimate arrogance.
Because you're saying you know better than the universe.
Exactly. Think about the human body from a purely biological standpoint. Every part has a necessary function. The parts we find unpleasant or dirty are absolutely essential for the whole organism to survive and process waste.
Right. The mouth needs the digestion process. Otherwise, the whole body dies from toxicity.
It is about recognizing the utility and necessity of every unique character and life path without imposing your own arbitrary moral hierarchy onto the ecosystem.
So if you judge someone else, even a demon, you are essentially claiming that you know better than the universe how things should be arranged.
Yep. It is the ultimate letting go of the need to police reality.
Okay, I follow the logic of the closed ecosystem, even if it is incredibly difficult to swallow in practice. But this brings us to the daily physical reality of this philosophy.
What do you mean?
Well, we aren't studying, we aren't striving for promotions, we aren't networking, we aren't judging the bad guys, we aren't even formally meditating.
Right.
What does a person following this philosophy actually do from the time they wake up to the time they go to sleep?
Let's look at the alternative he provides for intellectual reading. Since the text claims there are no books in heaven, you shouldn't waste your time reading them on earth.
Especially dense ones about success or wealth.
Exactly. Instead, you are instructed to read nature.
So instead of consuming linguistic data from a page, you just observe the physical world.
Yes. The text says when you are idle and bored, you should read the little birds and the flowers. Read the wind, clouds, rain, and snow.
Read the bees and ants.
The bamboo, the willow trees, the small streams. You become a full-time, unburdened observer of natural rhythms.
The psychological shift here is moving from extraction like trying to pull facts out of a book to just pure observation.
Exactly.
But what about basic survival? You still need calories. How do you eat if you don't have savings or a career plan?
Well, you work, but you work simply. The instruction is not to learn too many skills. Having just one skill is sufficient.
And if you don't have any skills?
If you lack any practical skills at all, possessing a single virtue is enough to get by, whether that is honesty, diligence, kindness, or simplicity.
So you work diligently to earn your keep, but you don't scheme or wait around praying for sudden windfalls from the sky.
Right. And the standard of living expected here is extremely austere.
Very austere. Salted turnips and steamed cornbread are held up as good food.
Yeah. And a thatched cottage with a bamboo fence is described as more beautiful than grand Taoist temples.
True beauty, according to the text, is the sound of roosters crowing, dogs barking, and children playing. You avoid extravagance, avoid waste, and absolutely do not consume what is unnecessary.
It's all about stripping it back to the absolute basics.
Listening to this, part of it sounds incredibly freeing, but to modern sensibilities, it also sounds kind of terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it replaces the fear of missing out with this profound, overwhelming vulnerability. You are completely letting go of the steering wheel.
You really are.
If you have no bank account and no contingency plans, what happens if you get sick? What happens if your thatched roof caves in during a storm?
That is exactly where Xuefeng introduces the concept of divine assurance. And it brings in a fascinating theological mashup.
Okay, break that down for me.
The text describes Chanyuan celestials, which refers to those who follow this path of Lifechanyuan, who bask in the radiance of the greatest creator.
And who exactly are they basking with? Because the text drops a lot of major historical names here.
It does. It specifically mentions being accompanied by a mix of historical sages. Jesus Christ, Buddha Shakyamuni, and Laozi.
It's an incredible blend. You have the Taoist focus on non-action and naturalism from Laozi, the detachment from suffering from Buddha, and the personal, loving reassurance of Jesus.
Yeah, it creates this universalist safety net. The philosophy relies on the freedom of Taoism, but shores up that terrifying vulnerability you mentioned with a promise of a personal, protective God.
The greatest creator.
Right. The absolute promise here is that everything, your food, your clothes, your housing, every aspect of your life is under divine protection. You are explicitly told, do not worry, do not be afraid, do not be anxious, and do not prepare for the future.
Do not prepare for the future. That instruction goes against every single survival instinct wired into the human brain.
It requires an absolute rewiring of how you perceive security. But it all culminates in a really powerful grounding metaphor at the very end of the essay.
Oh, the beverage analogy.
Yes. The text states that you must understand that clear water is more important than strong coffee or other beverages.
That analogy hits so hard. Strong coffee represents all our artificial stimulants.
All of them.
It is our wealth, our social drama, our ambition, our complex knowledge. It is all the things that make us jittery, that keep us up at night, and that make us feel like we are moving fast even when we are just spinning our wheels.
Strong coffee masks your natural state. It forces a reaction out of you. Clear water is the unadorned present moment.
It's the salted turnip, the little bird.
Exactly. The simple reality of just existing without needing to modify your consciousness or your environment. The text promises that as long as you keep the clear water, you have found the essence of life.
So what does this all mean for you, listening to this deep dive right now? Xuefeng's vision of ultimate simplicity asks us to radically strip away the complex, heavy layers of modern life.
It asks us to drop our ambitions, our constant moral judgments of the ecosystem around us, and our obsessive need to stockpile money and knowledge as a buffer against the future.
He is making a passionate pitch for a life defined by radical trust, salted turnips, and the simple, everyday beauty of reading a stream instead of a textbook.
And even if you have absolutely no intention of emptying your bank account, moving into a thatched cottage, or throwing away your library card tomorrow.
Which I'm guessing most of us don't.
Right? But this text still serves as a powerful mirror. It forces us to examine our own daily routines and ask, which of our so-called complexities are actually bringing us joy and utility?
And which are just heavy luggage we are dragging through the airport on a temporary journey.
Exactly. It brings us right back to that massive suitcase we talked about at the beginning.
Maybe we really don't need the contingency jacket. Maybe we don't need the 6 books. But before we wrap up today, there is one final lingering paradox in this text that requires some thought.
There is a very interesting tension in the final lines.
Yeah. At the very end of the essay, Xuefeng promises that if you just keep the clear water, then everything else will come. He explicitly writes that your wishes will eventually be fulfilled and your ideals will certainly be realized.
Which is a staggering contradiction to end on.
It really is. If this entire philosophy requires you to brutally discard all your ambitions, desires, aspirations, and ideals in the very first place, what wishes are actually left to be fulfilled at the end of the journey?
Right. Does ultimate radical simplicity eventually erase the very concept of a wish?
Or does it quietly, slowly replace our manufactured strong coffee desires with something else entirely?
It's definitely something to mull over the next time you find yourself packing an overstuffed bag for a trip.